Well, thanks for joining our Kingdom interview series. I've just been having a blast interviewing various ministers of the gospel of Jesus. And one of my most favorite things to do is interview ministers who are authentic. I was raised in environments that were inauthentic in the church culture. In dispensational churches, Plymouth Brethren, Reformed churches, Pentecostal churches, there was always an air of inauthenticity, particularly from ministers, because we have to hide our dark spots. And today I have a very, very special guest, and actually he's a renowned minister. And for some like myself, renowned in a very wonderful, tender-hearted way, and for others, maybe in a negative way. But we're just totally blessed to have with us today Tullian Tchividjian. And he is a pastor at the Sanctuary in Palm Beach County. He is also the grandson of Billy and Ruth Graham. So he's rubbed elbows with literally a man who has spoken to more people, by Tullian's own words, than Jesus himself. However, if Jesus had the internet, I think he would be more popular. Anyway, he was pastor of the former New City Church, which merged with the historic Coral Ridge Presbyterian Church in 2009, and he pastored there until 2015. And if I'm not mistaken, Coral Ridge was where Dr. D. James Kennedy was. Is that correct?
That is correct. That is correct. He died, and a year and a half later, I became the pastor.
All right. And Tullian has written 8 books, is that right? Is that still up to date? 8 books?
Let's see. 8, but let me count them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, 8. 8, yes.
All right. And in 2011, his book, Jesus, and I love this title, by the way, Jesus Plus Nothing Equals Everything. It won the Christianity Today's Book of the Year in 2011. He currently ministers again at the Sanctuary with his wife, Stacy. And it is totally an honor to have you, not to put you on a pedestal in an unhealthy way. We all know how that can be for parishioners as well as ministers. But I have been perusing this beautiful book called Carnage and Grace. Now I'm going to cover the subtitle. Okay? You might see a title like this, but what really captured my attention is something you would never see on the cover of a John MacArthur book. Confessions of an Adulterous Heart. And as Tullian has said, when we mention ministers where we might have a critique, we are not committing the ad hominem fallacy. We are addressing the argument. That is our goal. And it's not John MacArthur as the man. There is a theology, a deep-seated theology that goes back prior to Protestantism. It's just that Protestantism brought a lot of things into it, and we see this among the Puritans. We see it in the Great Awakening. I love the title. I've got some specific things that I want to ask about in the book that are beautiful. And there are also some topics that I just really want to pick your brain about, Tullian. And again, it's thrilling to have you.
Well, seriously, man, thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here. I told you a few minutes ago, before we started recording, that I am currently on vacation. I take the month of July off every year. I've been doing that for 2 decades. It gives me a chance to recharge my mind, recharge my body. I create a lot of content, both as a writer and a speaker. And so to give my mind a break and to just unplug with my wife and my family for a month has always been good and healthy for me. But when I got your request to come on, I was happy to accept it, happy to have this conversation. You asked me, are there things that we can or cannot talk about? I'm like, dude, you talk to me about whatever you want to talk about. An open book, and I'm happy to talk about anything and everything from John MacArthur's message to Ozzy Osbourne's music. You ask it, I'll answer it to the best of my ability.
Oh, well, fantastic, fantastic. I was perusing, and you let me know it's sort of an outdated website, but I encourage everybody to check it out. There's an article section that, for me, is has even been it's been as touching as reading Tullian's book, Carnage and Grace. But there is an article that you have on there, and the title of that article, I think it's fantastic. I believe it's called "Getting Better Doesn't Work." Getting better doesn't work, and my heart tracks with that so much. I too fell in ministry, committed adultery, lost my marriage, and in all honesty, I came from this dispensational tradition. David Hawking, Chuck Smith, Chuck Swindoll, Dallas Theological Seminary, all about it. And it's very interesting. David Hawking specifically was this guy is bigger than life. I mean, I think the guy's like 6'5" or something, must weigh 300 pounds, but just this big, deep, rich voice and just speaks with authority. And I was hearing him speak on First John years ago, and he really captured my attention the way that he exegeted scripture. Now, looking back, of course, we know some of the problems with that, but he too had a scandal, fell for all the world to see. He wrote books on romance and marriage and all this stuff. And it's common among Christians to hear from the secular world or the unbelieving world, the biggest problem or opposition people have to Christianity is watching ministers fail. And what has really stood out to me, and tell me your thoughts on this, Tullian, I don't believe it's specifically because ministers fail. I believe it's because ministers posture morality and speak in such a way to sort of condemn the unbelieving world as if they would never do those things, right? And that's one of the things I was really intrigued about and just resonated again with, where you're like, man, I don't want to say I'm never going to do that. It's like that for him that thinks he stands, take heed lest he fall. I mean, you see that throughout the Word of God. If there's anyone who probably said that to himself, it's King David, a man after God's own heart, who commits adultery, gets her pregnant, kills her husband. Hey, it doesn't get better than that. I think he might be excommunicated from grace to you, to be honest.
I think, listen, I think what you just described is spot on. I could not have said it better myself. I completely agree with you. It's not ministers who fall. It's ministers who have postured themselves as people who don't fall or who can't fall, who then do. Of course, it gives the world an opportunity to go, look, you guys don't practice what you preach, or you guys are hypocritical, or whatever else they might say. And ironically, I was never a guy, never a preacher. I mean, my whole life came crashing down in 2015. I had written books and had been traveling and leading this, large historic church for a number of years and speaking all over the place. Given my family heritage and given the platform that I had as a result of the church I was pastoring and the books that I was writing, I was a in-demand guy. But I never was one of those guys that was like, hey, I've got it together. Watch my life if you want to know how to do it right. That stuff always, I was always allergic to that stuff. Even from the time I was a kid, I just was always allergic to that stuff. In fact, I told my wife yesterday that if a preacher can't get up and use himself as exhibit A in terms of their own dire need for grace, they just shouldn't be preaching. And there will be a lot of people who disagree with that because that's not the job of a preacher. The job of a preacher is to just, exegete the passage of scripture. And I'm like, no, that's not just the job of the preacher. It's not. I don't care what they say. That's not the job of a preacher. And I've seen the fruit of that kind of posturing. Right. And we've seen it in legalistic circles, sometimes in legalistic circles, or moralistic circles where the focus of the Christian faith is the life of the Christian, and that's the predominant messaging. You'll get a lot of, a guy like me who was known as a grace guy, falls the way that I did and cheats on my wife the way that I did, my first wife, the way that I did. And they go, see, this is the fruit of that message. That this is what happens when you believe in grace the way that this guy believed in grace. And I've got all sorts of issues with that. But the one interesting question I always pose to them when they say those things is, well, then how do you explain the people in your circles who fall the way that I fell? I mean, in other words, if you're going to blame my message for my fall as if the problem was grace, not my own sin. I mean, it's like that grace was not the issue here, guys. Okay, I promise you. But how do you explain then the people in your circles who do exegete scripture, verse by verse and chapter by chapter and word for word, and they study, they're super serious about Bible study and all that kind of stuff. How do you explain their fall? How do you explain their crash and burn? How do you explain their bottoming out? So I was never one of those guys that postured myself as someone who had it all together. I come from a very open, honest, transparent, expressive family. I'm one of 7 kids. It was loud, noisy. We all had big personalities. Most of us did anyway. We all talked a lot. If we felt it, we spoke it. I had a mom that was like that. I had a dad that kind of kept everything together. But I mean, I had, people around me my whole life who have always been very expressive and real and transparent. My grandparents on my mom's side were amazing in this regard. Just very real, very honest, very humble. So it was always distasteful to me when Christian leaders thought it was their responsibility to put before people a moral example in terms of, look at my life, be like me. And I'm like, man, that is incredibly dangerous. I went to Reformed Theological Seminary, and there was this big shot pastor who came to guest lecture one day in class. And he was the guy we all wanted to be. He was pastoring the big church, and he was the successful guy. And he said something, I was in my late 20s at the time, and he said something that I agreed with then. He stood up and said, don't ever stand up and confess your own sins to your people, because your people need someone to look up to. And at the time I thought, man, he's right. Yes. And everybody bought it, shaking, nodding their heads. Yes, that's good. That's good. And of course they take verses out of context, like, Paul saying, imitate me as I imitate Christ, and, all that kind of stuff to justify this moral posturing. But
which, by the way, I've never been able to say that to anybody in all the years I've been in
Right. So this guy said this to the entire class, and at the time we all bought it. And it didn't take me long in ministry and life to realize that is the absolute worst counsel anyone could ever give a room full of prospective preachers. And so and yet, even though I was never that guy who sort of postured myself as someone who had it together, even when I crashed and burned, and I mean, there was lies and manipulation and cover-ups and secrets, and I mean, all the stuff that goes with that kind of thing, there was still an intense canceling that happened of me and my ministry, and Christian bookstores taking all of my books out of their stores, and any place I'd ever preached taking down sermons from their websites and all of that stuff. And so even though we may not be the kind of guys that will stand up and say, hey, we don't have it all together. I need grace as much as anybody in this room because I am a struggler, a white knuckler. I'm in recovery from life just like you are. I'm weak and vulnerable just like you are. It doesn't protect us because the religious community is so law-laden without even realizing it. The predominant messaging out there, regardless of denomination or church style or tradition or not, the predominant messaging out there is the focus of the Christian faith is the life of the Christian. That's the predominant messaging. It is do more, try harder, get better, climb higher for God. That's it. And that is a recipe for disaster, I've discovered. And because I've been so wide open and public about my own crash and burn 10 and a half years ago, people from all over the world, people in ministry, people not in ministry, average people who are Christians, people who are not Christians, reach out to me. I mean, I could show you hundreds and hundreds of letters. I think the book I put maybe like 10 of the letters in there, but I could show you hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people who are falling or they've crashed and burned. They've lost big. They live with the guilt and the shame and the regret of that. And church and Christians are the last place they feel safe going with their messiness. And so, I mean, the fact of the matter is, if we're not attracting the same kinds of people that Jesus attracted, then we're not preaching the same message that Jesus preached. And churches, we named our church here in Jupiter, Florida, the Sanctuary, because that's what a church ought to be. A place where it's safe to tell the truth about yourself. A place where it is safe to be honest and to admit that you yourself are a struggler. A place where you can share secrets with trusted people and they don't blink, they don't flinch, they don't cancel you or treat you like you're a leper. I mean, that's the way church ought to be. And the reason it's not is because we've gotten off the reservation from a messaging standpoint, where it should be all about God and his work for us. It has become all about us and our work for God. And that's created a moralistic culture that encourages pretending. It encourages secrecy, encourages it. So I couldn't agree with you more. I am a huge believer, and I know the book makes this very clear and plain, but I'm a huge believer in recovery. And prior to my own fall, I always had a sensitive spot in my heart and mind for people in recovery from traditional, conventional addictions like drugs or alcohol or food or sex or whatever. I had people in my own family that struggled with those conventional addictions. So I had a soft spot, but I never saw myself as a person in recovery. Recovery was for people who had sort of given into the demon of those conventional addictions. But after I crashed and burned and felt subsequently orphaned and abandoned by the Christian world, so to speak, the people that I connected with, or that God connected to me first and foremost, were people in recovery. And I'm sitting in circles with these people. We all got there via different routes. I didn't get there the same way they got there, but we're all sitting there. And I couldn't relate to the heroin addict who was addicted to heroin, or the alcoholic who was addicted to alcohol, or the porn addict. Those weren't my addictions. So I couldn't relate to that part. What I could relate to was the fact that I deal with guilt, shame, regret, loss. I nuked my life and hurt people that I love. I've burned bridges. And so sitting in circles with other desperate people at rock bottom, man, it made me realize you don't have to be a person who struggles with a conventional addiction like drugs and alcohol to be a person in recovery. If you are a human being, you are in recovery. There are two kinds of people in this world: people in recovery who know that they are, and people in recovery who think that they're not. But there is no one who is not recovering from something: fear, insecurity, abandonment issues, anger, whatever the case may be, rejection or fear of rejection. I mean, there's just, if you're a human being, you're in recovery. We are broken people living in a broken world with other broken people. And that means we're all in when it comes to this recovery thing. And that has been my lifeline. We've built the sanctuary around that. In fact, I affectionately refer to the sanctuary as a recovery place masquerading as a church, because that really is sort of the focus. And you don't have to be sort of a junkie, a homeless junkie under a bridge to get that. I mean, I know lots of corporate CEOs and people in the Jupiter area that are wealthy, that have in some ways come to terms with their own brokenness and find a home at the sanctuary because it's real, and we talk about real things, and the leaders of the church talk about their own addictions and their own struggles publicly and privately, and that creates a safe spot for people to finally come to terms with what's going on inside of them.
Oh, 100%. One of the things that came to mind when you were just elaborating on that is this issue of taboo sins that religion has created. Specifically, I think since Christ, professing Christianity has tiered sins. And I think when we talk about our vertical relationship with God, God doesn't tier sins. I mean, James 2:10 is clear. If you transgress in one point, you've transgressed in all of them. Mm-hmm. So if you look at one of the sins in the commandments, the 10, right, which I have to laugh that so many people see that as the rule of life for the Christian. One of the things you wrote, I love this. You said the Bible couldn't be clearer, and this is in that article, Getting Better, about this mechanism. Paul says that the law, the expectation, requirement, exhortation came in to increase the trespass. So my question is, if the law, I believe Paul told Timothy, is not made for the righteous, which we're righteous in Christ, it's not like the moral, you know what I mean? It's just so funny how people interpret righteousness, or as you were saying the other day, pursue holiness without which no one will see the Lord. Well, his holiness, righteousness and holiness.
Yeah.
But in other words, the law makes the problem shine.
Yes.
Why would we choose as our rule of life the thing that goes absolutely contrary to how God views us? Colossians 1, holy and unblameable and unreprovable in his eyes. And if that's how God sees us, what right do we have? And who are we to view his children as anything inferior to holy, unblameable, and unreprovable? And I want to bring, you also touched on something. They canceled you. When you fell, when you crashed, they canceled you, which is amazing to me and incredibly hypocritical. There's a guy out there from Ligonier who recently fell. I think it's within the last year or so with Ligonier Ministries. And it was this huge lordship theology guy, the John MacArthur style, right? And specifically, he would talk all about sexual sin and young men, you have to be strong and have integrity. And he had been, messing around. He was 70s, messing around with a 25-year-old for 5 years, right? We get it. We totally get it. But now it's so fascinating. They canceled him. They removed all of his messages. And my question is, wait a minute. You thought it was truth at one point. Put it on your websites because you believed it to be true. And so in essence, what you've done is you have taken one man's sin and made it triumph over truth.
It's well put. Well put. Yeah.
And
yeah.
So
that's in essence, that's exactly what's being done. Yeah.
Oh, totally. And you basically what you would have had to have done is removed the Psalms that David had penned prior to his sin.
Yeah.
Anything that he wrote that came from the
Hmm.
mouth of God, we would have to remove it.
And they all have, like, I've made that same exact argument. I know other people have made that same exact argument, and they all have answers for that. They've got their canned answers for those objections. But if you take and they proof text and I'm like, bro, you can do all the theological, exegetical gymnastics you can muster up.
Right.
But what you just said is a fact. If we cannot separate the message from the messenger, and because on the one hand, we'll say we are not the center of we're not the focal point here. The truth that we speak is the focal point. Well, the moment you cancel someone who spoke truth, and like you said, now you've essentially taken the sin of the messenger and trump carded the truth that was spoken through that fallen messenger, you have just made the messenger the focal point.
That's right.
You've actually done the exact opposite of what you say should be done. So, yeah, I mean, my gosh, my mom used to say, honey, if God can speak through Balaam's ass, he can speak through anybody. And she was exactly right then, and she's exactly right now. So here's my sort of my overarching, and this is something that I say regularly and have for a number of years. God only uses broken and weak people who fail because there aren't any other kinds of people.
That's right.
Period.
That's
And
right.
there aren't a lot of people in religious circles who want to admit that. There just isn't. They don't want to admit that they are just as broken as the last celebrity pastor that fell flat on his face and was discovered with all these secrets. They don't want to believe that. They want to believe that they are better than that. They want to believe that they're not as susceptible to that, that they're not as vulnerable to that, that they're further along in their relationship with God than that person is. And so the thing that Martin Luther said about the law, which I love, was, and this is a bit of a paraphrase from me, but essentially he said, the law is a divinely sent Hercules to curb the tendencies of self-righteousness in us all. And so it's the law is there to expose us. And the moment I start thinking I'm doing good, I'm ahead of that guy, I'm better than that guy, Jesus had to deal with people like that all the time. And when he preached his Sermon on the Mount and finally concluded his little section on the Ten Commandments by saying, here's a summary of it all. You got to be perfect as your Father in heaven is perfect. That's the standard. God's not dumbing it down. God's not saying, well, just do your best. Get a little better tomorrow than you were today. And the only thing God accepts is perfection. And there was only one who was perfect. So just shut up and thank God for Jesus.
That's right.
I mean, honestly, dude, this is why the religious world is so much less attractive to me than the recovery world, because in the recovery world, they admit this stuff. They talk openly about this stuff. They're not blaming other people. They're not thinking that they're better than the guy sitting next to them. If anything, they struggle with thinking that they're worse than the guy sitting next to him. And so there's a level of honesty and vulnerability and a willingness to tell the truth about yourself in recovery circles that just flat out does not exist in mass in religious circles, unfortunately.
Let's just for a second, and I know you'll understand exactly where I'm going with this, especially with the same tradition of our Reformed background. And it's related to this idea of getting better. And I love one of the things you said in Carnage and Grace. It's one step forward, one step back, two steps forward, three steps back. Well, the Reformed world, and I want to pick on them specifically, okay? And I'm a grace guy. I'm a grace guy.
Yeah.
I'm a tulip guy. I believe in sovereignty and all that stuff. But I no longer run with those crowds because I can't be myself. I can't be.
It's good, man. It's good.
So, and it's not that I'm looking at myself as better. It's that why would I go in there just to be excommunicated? That makes no sense to me.
Yeah, we're not looking for those kinds of friends.
That's right. That's right. I mean, talk about bad company corrupts good morals. You know what I mean? I mean, goodness. You know what does that say? A companion of fools will be destroyed. I mean, throughout the scripture, though, you look at who the fools are, and they're the people who are just filled with themselves and self-righteous. The people who say, "Stand by thyself, for I am holier than thou." God says those are the ones who are as stench in his nostrils. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's the irony. It's
Oh,
unbelievable. Yeah, I
completely.
agree with you 100%.
So let's wax a little bit theological here, which I believe may be at the core or a huge part of the core of the problem. And you'll know this phrase, right? When I say it, the idea, and it's related to getting better, doesn't work, but the idea of progressive sanctification, the idea that somehow in our thoughts and in our actions, we are growing closer and closer to the impeccability of Christ, almost bordering on perfectionism, right? Um, but there's a psychological phenomenon behind that. It produces a psychology of superiority as long as you're taking those two steps forward and just one back. I like to refer to
Dude.
Jesus as having practiced regressive sanctification. Right? Here's this man after God's own heart, and then he takes steps so far back that guys like MacArthur, Ligonier Ministries, the Reformed World, and some of our favorite Reformed authors. My favorite author is John Owen. Love him. Death of Death and the Death of Christ changed my life. But man, there are other things where he talks about, mortification of sin. Dude, what do you mean by that? He may wax long. So it produces that psychology of superiority, in my humble opinion. Give me your thoughts on that, because everything you're saying right now, I totally agree with, but it totally contradicts the idea of progressive sanctification.
Yeah.
They use a verse. It's the number one verse, 2 Corinthians 3:18. We all are being changed into his image, which, if you look at the context, it's talking about old covenant compared to new covenant. But I want to hear your thoughts on that. And if you see that as something that is somewhat as diabolical as I see it, and super, super harmful to Christians.
Your phrase that it produces a psychology of superiority, I'm stealing that, by the way. Okay, I'm stealing that, and I'm not going to give you credit for it. I'm going to take credit for it myself. Really, really, really good. I am in total agreement with you. If there is, and I'll nuance it a little bit, but if there is anything progressive about sanctification at all, it's not the progress that they tell us it is.
That's right.
Okay, it's not that kind of progress. One of my favorite theologians was a now deceased Lutheran guy by the name of Gerhard Forde, who wrote, in my opinion, the best stuff on sanctification I've ever read. Completely shattered all of my previous paradigms, challenged all of my previous assumptions about progressive sanctification and getting better and all that kind of stuff. But he has this line in the beginning of his essay on sanctification where he defines sanctification is the art of getting used to our justification. That I love. Yeah, or another simpler way to put it is sanctification is adjusting to our freedom, if you want to put it like that. Okay, so if we want to, and I'll create two categories here. One, progressive sanctification, and I've got the same issues with that language as you do. But if we're going to even talk in that phrase, let's talk about what progress really means. And then positional sanctification, which is we are already set aside. We are already as holy and righteous as we will ever be in this life, because we wear as a straitjacket a cloak of righteousness from another, an alien righteousness. It's imputation. In fact, I even remember watching a panel discussion from a Ligonier conference, and one of the questions that came was, what do you guys think of the word evangelical? And all these guys were just talking about, the weaknesses of evangelicalism, and the things, of course, they were picking on were, they weren't serious about theology, they weren't serious about doctrine, and they're Arminian, and they, blah blah blah. That was their sort of hobby horse. But interestingly, at the tail end, R.C. Sproul said, I think we should just get rid of the word altogether and call ourselves imputationists. And I was like, that's gold. I like that.
Right.
Because that's really what this whole thing is about. This whole thing, the Christianity is first and foremost about substitution, not transformation. And that has to be understood. So on the one hand, if we want to talk about positional sanctification, we are already as righteous and holy and sanctified as we will be in this life as a result of Jesus's work for us, imputed to us. Done deal, full stop. Now, if I'm turning to my left and I'm talking to a group of people who believe in progressive sanctification, however they might want to define it, I'll say, well, let's talk about how the Bible describes progress. What does the Bible describe progress? Does the Bible describe progress as sinning less, getting better in the typical ways that we think about when we think about getting better? Or is it more like Paul saying at the end of his life, I'm the worst guy that I know? Like, the closer I get to God, the more my own blemishes I see, and the less I trust in my own works and righteousness, and the more I trust in Christ's work and righteousness. So if there's a progression at all, it's not a progression upward, it's a progression downward. I liken it to spelunking rather than mountain climbing. If there is a sanctifying process at all, it's a process of discovering more and deeper caverns of need inside of us, where the imputation of Christ's righteousness becomes more felt for us on the ground of life. So, Paul in Philippians 3, I love the way he describes it when he said, he gives us his spiritual resume. I was Pharisee of Pharisees, circumcised on the 8th day, tribe of Benjamin. I mean, he gives us whole, as it pertains to the law, I knew the whole thing backwards and forward, blindfolded. I mean, I was as religious can get.
Yeah, blameless.
Blameless, he said. In terms of you guys' rules and regulations about what it looks like to be a religious person, I was blameless. I had you all beat.
Right.
And he said, and now I look at all of that stuff and consider it rubbish, a waste of time in comparison to Christ and his work for me. And so what happens with Paul is, if my summary of that whole section is, if we want to talk about spiritual growth in any way, shape, or form, let's talk about it like this. Spiritual growth is not, I'm getting better and better and stronger and more competent every day. Spiritual growth is, I'm becoming increasingly aware of how weak and incompetent I am, and how strong and competent Jesus is for me. So even if the progressive sanctification guys want to talk about progress, I'll be happy to have that conversation, but it ain't going to go the direction you want it to go. Right. You're talking about, you're going to talk about progress upward, and I'm going to prove to you that it's actually progress downward. But when it comes to the word sanctification in particular, positional sanctification is the focal point of the Bible. It is. So, I mean, if people can use arguments, and I've seen them for decades now, yeah, well, over here it talks about positional sanctification, but over here what is implied is progressive sanctification. And I'm like, dude, the overarching emphasis of the Bible from beginning to end is God's work for us. So positional sancification is the dominant way in which the Bible speaks about sanctification. Even if you go back to the original language, there's so many, the verbs are perfect tense, they're completed, it's a done deal. You're in because God justified you. That's right. So yeah, this obsession with progress and sinning less is so narcissistic, dude. I mean, it's unbelievable. Unbelievable.
It is. And it goes back to that whole psychology that we were talking about. And this kind of leads into something that you mentioned You were in a blue shirt and you were speaking at a friend of his church, bigger guy, and I guess you go up there fairly regularly to teach at his
Okay.
church. But one of the things you were talking about was how you listen more, right? You listen more. And what's interesting is here we have this grand, glorious view that, as you said, we could not be any holier. If we have the righteousness and holiness of Jesus,
What else do we need?
We couldn't be a double doozy holy or something like that, right?
Yeah, right, right.
And so what happens though is when you recognize that and you become a common word, it's becoming more pronounced and very, very popular today is the word self-awareness, right? Now, from the secular perspective, it's kind of tainted, but when you become aware of how you are not better than the most profound atheist, the most profound genocidal maniac, that you are not better than that person, you are more humble. And you will spend time. People are quick to say, oh, Jesus, he was a friend of sinners. And yet, in so many of these reform circles, you wouldn't catch them dead with sinners. You would catch them, just totally rubbing elbows with all of their reform friends. And I sit there and I think, man, you feel the most comfortable with people in recovery. You've stated that, and I'm the same way. But let's talk just for a second about this issue of listening, and also the kind of courage that it takes to be the first in, say, a men's group, where, men are sharing their weaknesses and, oh yeah, I got angry the other day on the road. Someone cut me off, and another guy's, yeah, I've been a little bit jealous. Imagine if a guy said, I've been struggling with homosexuality. I went back into a gay bar, and this guy's an elder. Let's say he's an elder.
Right. Yeah. Never in a million years.
Or what's the guy? New Life Ministries, Ted Haggard, president.
Ted. Yeah.
Remember that? National.
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah.
Evangelicals. And he says, and he denied it. And then all of a sudden the voicemail comes out and he says, I had a dark secret. Well, holy crap. Why did he feel afraid to talk about this dark secret? Because he knew how the church responds to testimonies.
Of course.
But here we are, and I that's why I love it when people tell me don't confess, like this pastor said, don't confess in front of the congregation. I'm like, James says, confess your faults one to another, pray for one another that you may be healed. I mean, just straight up telling us to. And so,
straight up.
Yes. But here's Jesus, a friend of sinners, hanging out with the outcast, the one who were caught in sin. And they were cast outside the camp. And of course, he was cast outside the camp. We know it.
Yeah.
But so we do feel more comfortable. And we have to, though, be more brave, more courageous at these men's groups, at this Bible study, to go in more depth.
And I agree with you. And I think that we have a group that meets every Thursday night at the sanctuary called The Vault. And it's guys. We have a recovery group that my wife leads for women, and then a recovery group that's facilitated by a good friend of mine for men. And we make it very clear that this is not a Bible study. This is not a church group. We have people of faith, people not of faith. I mean, it's in function, it's an AA meeting. Although not everyone sitting around the circle has a struggle with alcohol. That's not the issue. The issue is this is a place where you can come and tell the truth about yourself without anybody blinking, without anybody flinching, and not feel like you're a leper as a result. And we call it The Vault because what's said here stays here. So everything's uber confidential. And the entire reason that it works is because that is my recovery group, mine. I'm the leader of this organization. I'm the leader of this church, but I'm in there talking about my struggles in real time, my frustrations in real time, my fears, my insecurities in real time, my destructive habits in real time. In real time. Not guys, 3 years ago I struggled. I had a professor in seminary say, listen, if you're going to be a pastor, it's safe to talk about your sins from 3 to 5 years ago, but not to talk about your present sins. And he was saying it jokingly, like that's so ridiculous, although it's true. And so we're all about like real-time struggle. Like don't tell me this is what I struggled with 10 years ago, but thanks be to the grace of God, I've overcome that. That's not what this group is about. This group is about present, real-time struggles. And there are no rules when it comes to language. We do have rules in terms of how long the shares, go, 5 to 7 minutes, because we got a group of people and there's 20 guys in there. So 5 to 7 minutes. We're not correcting, we're not giving advice, we're not teaching. This is just each person, and you don't have to share. You can, if you want to pass, you can pass. If you just want to sit and listen, totally fine, just like an AA meeting. But the reason that works is because I'm in there as sort of the figurehead of this organization we call the Sanctuary. And I'm not there because I'm like, well, in order for this place to become a safe place, I got to go in there and be honest too. It's not a means to an end. I need this group. I need it. I am a white knuckler. I've been a white knuckler my whole life. I'll be a white knuckler till the day I die. I struggle with me more than I struggle with anybody else. I am a how do I put it? A concoction of contradictions. I love and I hate. I give and I take. I'm a mess, dude. I'm a mess. And so I need this group. I need a place where I can go, other than my wife or other than my kids, or, I need a place where I can go and sit in a room and go, dude, guys, I got to be honest. I thought about freaking shutting the doors of this place 10 times this week because I don't want to do it anymore. I don't want to do it. I'm worn out. I'm tired. I don't want to do it. There have been times where I've gone in and said, I don't want to be married anymore. There have been times when I've gone in and I've just talked about my disappointment with God. I'm real in there, and I don't do it to create an environment. I do it because I need it. And that has created an environment.
Right.
And so it gives the people that are a part of the sanctuary, or that walk through the doors of the sanctuary, a real sense that these guys mean what they say. I could tell you a story about a church a relatively large church that is kind of famous in the South Florida area because of its size. And their motto is no perfect people allowed. Great mantra, great motto, great for branding, great for marketing. I felt absolutely, even though this guy and I were colleagues in the sense that we both ministered in South Florida and were acquaintances, and I had preached in his church before, when the shit hit the fan for me, it was like silence, crickets, even in my attempt to reach out first. Like I need someone to talk to. I need some place to go. I need a place to be. I feel all alone, and I'm losing friends and people all over the place, and I don't know where to go. I was drowning. And so I'm just like, this isn't just a mantra for us. This is the real thing. And it's the real thing because I need it. I need this place. If the sanctuary didn't exist, I don't think I would go to church anywhere. And the reason I wouldn't go to church anywhere is not because I don't believe that people of faith should gather together and mutually encourage one another and pray for one another and confess all that stuff. But in terms of going to church, I don't fit in with these people. I just don't. I feel way more comfortable sitting in an Alcoholics Anonymous group, even though I'm not an alcoholic, than I do sitting in a church, and I'm a Christian. Right. So I honestly don't think it's ever going to change. Yeah. I used to think it could change, and I used to even, arrogantly think that I would be the catalyst for that change. Martin Luther started the first Reformation, I'll start the second, so stupid. But now, much more realistically, I look at it and I go, dude, life in this world is hard. like I said before, we're broken people living in a broken world with other broken people. If you can find a spot, however small, where you can tell the truth about yourself and be real and have the help and encouragement and non-blinking friends that you need as you make your way through the wilderness of this life, that's it. That's what the sanctuary is for me. That's what the sanctuary is for the people who come. And I'm content with that. I'm content with the idea that, okay, as much as I would love for every local church to be like the sanctuary in that regard, that ain't happening, dude. The machine's too big. There's too much money out there. The messaging that they've been propagating is so far and so wide and so deeply ingrained into the DNA of the entire establishment, the entire system. It ain't changing. I mean, short of Jesus's return, it ain't changing. So when you can find a pocket of people that you can sort of live life with that believe the way we're talking right now, I'm like, that's my spot. This is my well right here, and I'll stay right here.
When I crashed and burned, it was amazing to me how all of these verses about mercy began to jump out at me, right? Jesus saying, go and learn what this means. I want mercy. Or he's shown you to do justly, to love mercy. I always tell people, it's not just, well, I'm going to be merciful. I got to be merciful to him. No, he's saying love being merciful. And I'll tell you what, when you fall and you crave that mercy from people, God uses that. And I love this, where you said, I wanted to do something with my regrets, right? In Carnage and Grace. It's like when you fall, I totally, I believe in the sovereignty of God. I do. I believe that God is sovereign over our successes, over our failures, but he does it in a way that's not arbitrary or somehow mechanical. He's doing it organically. And he's saying, look, you've got some pride going here. And I am dwelling with you, but I want you to fulfill Isaiah 57. Thus says the high and lofty one who inhabits eternity. I dwell with a person who's of a broken and contrite spirit. That's not to say we don't have the joy of the Lord. He's placed us on a rock. He's given us, we're soaring as eagles, right? But there's that spirit that enables us to be around the broken, those in recovery. And a verse that totally jumped out. Oh, and you talked about God's cast our sins into the sea of God's, it's
forgotten memory.
Forgotten memory. I mean, he straight up says, he straight up says their sins and their iniquities I will remember no more, right?
That's right.
And I always tell people, I tell people, I say, we are the best scuba divers sometimes. We go scuba diving and we bring out other people's sins, their junk, and we do it to ourselves, And God saying,
yes,
I put it in that sea of forgiveness.
Martin Luther said, this is again a paraphrase, it is the work of the devil, not the work of God, to bring up forgiven sins.
Straight up.
Okay, that is, or I have down the right side of my arm tattooed words to one of my favorite hymns, which says, well, may the accuser roar of sins that I have done. I know them well and thousands more. My God, he knoweth none. Yeah. That the fact that our sin is cast into the sea of God's forgotten memory. It's a done deal. Like we think about our sin way more than God does, way more. Right. And the interesting thing about the broken and the contrite, we automatically associate those words with joylessness. Right. There is a joy and a freedom in knowing that you're broken, because you're not having to pretend anymore. You're not having to hide anymore. You're not wearing your masks all the time and polishing those masks. I think it was the comedian Chris Rock who said, when someone meets us for the first time, they're not meeting us, they're meeting our representative. And I'm like, man, that is such a perfect description of most religious people. We present ourselves to each other and to the world differently than we actually are. And so, there is such a joy and such a freedom in finally being able to tell the truth about yourself. So much freedom. And the fact of the matter is, when your heart is gripped and grasped by the unconditionality of God's love for you, you don't care as much about what other people think. You just don't. It's what I call a sanctified I don't careness. You just don't care as much. Like if I know that God loves me unconditionally and that there's nothing I can do to make him love me more, and there's nothing I can do to make him love me less. I mean, I want you to like me, but if I tell you the truth about myself and you walk away from me because it's too much, I might not like it, but I'll be fine because God will never walk away from me. Right. God knows the truth about me and refuses to walk away from me. I will never leave you. I will never forsake you. And so there is a radical, infectious freedom that accompanies awareness of our own brokenness and proclivities and tendencies and triggers and all of those things that, quite frankly, people in the Reformed world laugh at stuff and go, oh, that's just, psychobabble. And I'm like, bro, you're like an honest exploration of the human condition is not psychobabble. Okay. I mean, you can, if you want to put theological terms to it, feel free to do it. There's no one that does it better than my friend Paul Zoll, who I refer to as the Christian community's premier theological psychologist. He's not a psychologist by trade. He's a theologian by trade, but his understanding of the human condition is so profound. And he has taught me for many, many years now, that when you come to honest terms with your own issues, whatever they are, it brightens the reality of God's love and God's acceptance of you, that God knows all these things too, and he loves you and he's okay with you because Christ's record is now your record, and Christ's righteousness is now your righteousness, and Christ's holiness is now your holiness, which is why I said a few minutes ago, we think about our sin way more than God does. Right. And and you know what, forget theology for a second, and because people will listen to this conversation and they'll start picking it apart. We're generalizing, we don't understand, we're creating straw men, blah blah blah. Okay, I mean, I've heard it all for like years. But let's just set that aside for a second. It's what I've said every time I've preached on the 10 Commandments. My sermons I've preached through the 10 Commandments 3 times, and they've all been, they're not like 10 Commandment sermons you and I grew up with. They're basically ways in which God exposes us and says, you can't do it. Okay. You can't do it. That's right. And what's interesting is the first time I preached through it, the 10 Commandments, by week 3, I was starting to get notes and letters. My sermons were on the radio and on television at the time. And so I was getting notes because this was 10 Commandments the way nobody had ever heard it before. The 10 Commandments are not a ladder that you climb to get closer to God. They're a wall that you crash into so that you finally realize, I can't do this. And so I started getting questions from people, and they said, okay, you'll appreciate this. They said, okay, I get what you're saying. One's inability to keep the 10 Commandments before God saves them. But once God saves them and they've been regenerated and they now have the Holy Spirit in them, aren't we now able, at least to some small degree, to keep the 10 Commandments? Okay. And my response to that, which was impassioned then, and it is equally impassioned now, is, you know what? That's an interesting question. And I'm sure that would be a fun theoretical discussion to have sitting around the dinner table or sitting in a cigar bar. I'm not interested in that. My interest is not in whether or not we can. My interest is, are you doing it? And if you're not, who cares whether you can do it or not, Right. And so that's what the Reformed community is. They're so fixated on the theology of the matter. Right. Yes, but regeneration provides you the power. I'm like, bro, everybody just shut up. Are any of you doing this? Really, seriously, doing this? Like, I mean, be honest with yourself. In your heart, okay? Are there any other gods before God in your heart? Well, no. I'm like, shut up. Like it's just so ridiculous. Like the lack of self-awareness and the lack of honesty and willingness to be honest about your messed upness is just so, dare I say, unreformed.
Right. Right.
That's the irony.
Well, and the crazy thing is it actually diminishes the holiness of the law.
Yes, it cheapens the law. Cheap grace is not the problem in the church. Cheap law is. That's because you've reduced it. You've reduced the standard low enough to where you can actually pull it off. Well, yeah. So now it becomes about you and you pulling it off rather than Jesus pulling it off for you.
That's right. That's right. And I love to ask very probing questions of Reformed ministers about their hearts. And I always tell them, especially the ones that are married, I'm divorced, but I love asking them publicly. It's great, when we're sitting in a circle. Do you ever lust after other women than your own wife?
Yeah.
When was the last time you watched pornography?
Yeah. Or tell me since the time you became a pastor, I go even more crass than that. I'm like, from the time you became a pastor, have you ever jacked off ever since you became a pastor? Ever? Right, okay. Right. Like, if you can sit there with a straight face and tell me you haven't, you're lying, dude. Yeah. And everybody. And if you have, then shut up. You're just as guilty as everybody else.
Well, yeah. And were you thinking about the female worship leader at your church?
Right.
I mean,
or the male one.
Right. I know.
Seriously.
Well, and people, they'll listen to this conversation. They'll say, oh, they're being irreverent. And no, we're being so reverent to the law of God that we're like, Lord, you fulfilled it. Right. That the righteousness of the law would be fulfilled in us.
Yes.
It's like, when they say that, you hit the nail on the head, Tullian. When they say that, well, now he gives us the ability. But what happens when you break it 4 times in a day? Are you any better than the guy that broke it 40 times? Is God really measuring? Is that
the focus is so theoretical rather than functional? It's ridiculous. Right. I'm like, bro, you guys spend all your time talking, writing, speaking about whether or not we can. I'm interested in whether or not you do.
That's right. And
if you're honest, you have to admit that you don't. So shut up, man. Straight up. Honestly, it's just the blindness. I said to a friend the other day that self-righteousness is by nature blind. You don't see it.
That's right.
It's so easy.
I used to, the whole spec plank thing.
Right. Yeah.
I really think what Jesus is saying is he's talking basically about the Pharisees. He says, before you try and take out a speck in your brother's eye, which basically what he's saying is, what the real issue is, because this brother is cleansed. You've got this plank of self-righteousness in your eye,
You can't, right. Can't see it. Can't see your own, you can't see it.
As we get near the end of the hour, I want to talk just briefly about one other thing here.
Sure.
Spirituality. Okay. I've been a music director in all kinds, Methodist, Pentecostal, Reform, you name it. I probably somewhere in there is the Church of Satan, but I don't know. I have directed music in so many different types of churches, and all of them talk about what spirituality is, getting up at 5 a.m. and having your quiet time for an hour and, memorizing scripture, or the Pentecostals, speaking in tongues or whatever. And Reformers, you have to, proclaim God's doctrines of grace every Sunday and election. One of the verses that now is a philosophy of ministry for me, like it is literally my whole philosophy of ministry. In CMI Live, I call it a theology of mercy. But this verse changed my life as to what true spirituality is. And I just would love to hear you just kind of articulate your thoughts and experience and theology practice, however you want to explain it. But he says, brothers, if any of you, it well, brothers, if any of you is overtaken in a fault, you who are spiritual, restore such a one. Now, the reformers would be, yeah, we have to restore them, put them on probation. They can't take communion for a while. It's keep them out of ministry. I'll never forget one time I was directing music for a mega church in Sacramento. It was a sister church of Calvary Chapel, and Chuck Smith would come and do his prophecy updates. And one of the girls on the worship team got pregnant, and we're all supposed to be all pro-life and everything, right? And so, well, we have to remove. She was out of wedlock. And we have to remove her from ministry because it would be a bad example if she started to show and everybody knows she's married. And I'm like, I was still, full on legalist back then, but even that was so odd to me because I'm thinking, you're supposed to be pro-life. You're supposed to be wanting to celebrate this life of this woman. What better testimony and example of love to let her continue worshiping?
Yeah.
Let people see this beautiful thing develop inside of her. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They remember it, and it's just such a drag. But it says, this restoration, he explains what it is. And he goes, restore such a one in a spirit of meekness, lest you also be tempted. And right here, so he explains spirituality, and then he says, bear one another's burdens. And so what? Fulfill the law of Christ. We're all talking about, how can we be more obedient? How can we fulfill God's law? He said, well, first of all, he fulfilled it, gave you his righteousness, but now you want to live it. Here's how you do it. Here's how, if you want to prove your spirituality, bear one another's burdens. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And the bearing of those burdens is for the purpose of restoration, not retribution.
Yes.
So, yeah, I mean, and true, I love that. And I love your explanation of that. True spirituality, in my opinion, or let's use if we want, it's synonymous, growth in grace. Okay, what does that even mean? Okay, what is that? People will talk about spiritual growth, or they might talk about sanctification or spirituality or growth in grace. And what does all that mean? Growth in grace is simply a growing awareness of my own need for grace. Period. That's what it is. And the more aware I become of my own need for grace, I become more gracious. Now, restoring you rather than removing you becomes what I want to do. I want to see you restore. I mean, if I was an independently wealthy guy and had $30 million of my own money sitting in a bank somewhere, I promise you, because you can't cancel the canceled. So I'm a free man. I can do whatever the hell I want. And the religious establishment can throw their stones, but I just sort of, chuckle and roll my eyes like, what are you guys going to do? Right. I would hire literally every single one of these guys, every single one of them who crash and burn, bottom out, and just simply say, you know what? You need time to rehab, and we all do. When trauma happens, we need rehabilitation time. But I don't want you to have to think about work. I don't want you to have to think about getting a job. I don't want you to think about it. I want you to be in a place with fellow misfits, with fellow ragamuffins, where you can just begin to heal. So I'll pay you an entire salary. I'll pay you $150,000 this year to come and just be here. Be here. Come to the vault. Be there Sunday morning. Meet with these, not for disciplinary purposes. Okay, you can leave whenever you want. Okay, and there'll be no harm, no foul on our part. But just to go, I want these guys, and I've had many comments. It's funny, but a lot of these guys, you had mentioned a guy earlier. I could mention other guys who are relatively visible in their own world, public in their own world, crash, burn, bottom out. And I'm one of the first guys they reach out to because I've been there, done that. They know, I'm there as a constant reminder that they're not alone. They always have a home here, no matter what they're guilty of. They have a home here, okay, a place to come and heal and be reminded that God loves them no matter what, period. And that our failures become the foundation for such an effective ministry to broken people. My gosh, man, I've learned more at the bottom than I ever did at the top. And it's changed me. I'm more empathetic than I used to be. I listen more than I used to. I'm not as, I'm not as focused on what I'm doing. I'm more focused on who I'm with these days. My kids would tell you that. My adult kids would tell you that. My grandkids would tell you that. My wife would tell you that. The people closest to me would tell you that. And it's not because I've been trying to become a different person, dude. It's not because I read books on how to be more forgiving, or I read books or listened to sermons on how to be more empathetic. That's not where it came from. It just came from falling, failing, and soaking in the hot tub of God's forgiveness, his non-blinking friendship for as long as I have, that over time it just kind of softens you, and it's not even like because I'm here and I got to get to here and I'm going to put my game plan in place. I mean, I'm like, dude, there is no other way for real inner transformation, true spirituality to take place apart from soaking in the reality of God's non-blinking friendship and forgiveness of you. There's just no other way. There's no other way. And when that stuff begins to soften you, you start looking at people differently. I mean, I am naturally drawn to strugglers these days, more so than ever before. Naturally drawn to them. I tell people when I counsel people, I say, listen, we all have secrets. We'll all die with secrets. Okay. There's nobody on planet Earth that will not die with some secrets. Okay. So you don't have to worry about concealing that stuff from me if you don't want to. If you want to, that's totally fine. If you don't want to, I'm a safe guy. And the reason they believe me when I say that is because they know what I've lived through. They know what I've done to myself. They know what I did to my first wife. They know what I did to my kids. They know that I've lived in that depressed state of regret and shame and guilt and loss and hopelessness. And I mean, I share that stuff openly, and I still struggle with that stuff. And they know that, and I tell them that. And so you become, in reference to the verse that you just quoted a few minutes ago, I mean, you become a safe person for people to go to when they screw up, period. And you would never find, and this is something that I know the religious community can and should learn from the recovery community, and it is this: you would never find a non-alcoholic leading an AA meeting, ever. What qualifies them to lead the meeting is their own struggle with alcohol. And what's so ironic is that the church is the only sort of recovery institution in the world that does not want struggling alcoholics leading the meeting. Right. And that's the problem.
Right.
And so, I think that the entire paradigm is off. The entire system is off. The entire program is off. The entire establishment is off. I don't have any hope that that's going to change. I'm just grateful that I have found a pack of misfit ragamuffins here in Jupiter, Florida, that love me no matter what, that I enjoy hanging out with, that I like, working out with and eating with and hanging out with. And I'm grateful for this little pocket, this sanctuary that God has provided me. And that's, I'm not really asking him for more than that right now. I'm just grateful that I have it. Yeah. Very grateful.
Well, Tullian, there are a lot of ministers who love to preach wrath in the church, and they love to preach judgment, and you need to be convicted and groveling. I wrote an article called From Groveling to Gratitude, but Isaiah says this, and I just want you to know why I reached out to you. Isaiah says, and I think this is the ministry of every minister, all of us. We're all priests, kingdom of priests. And he says, comfort my people. Cry to her that her warfare is over and that her iniquity is pardoned. That
beautiful.
Is the message of every minister, and should be the message behind every pulpit. And you comforted me. I just want you to know that. And that's
thank you, man. Thank you.
It just means a lot to me.
Thank you.
And this time where you took your own valuable time in your month off to meet with me. It just has blessed me so much, and I'm so
No, dude, thank you. I'm so glad. I didn't realize how glad I would be until now. I mean, you are articulate, well read. You know your church subculture very well in all of its stripes. I love the way you phrase things. I am in total agreement with you. And I just, I've found a new friend. It's good. You fit, man. You are my people.
thank God. We'll have to do it again. And
Yeah.
for our listeners, our viewers, please get a hold of this book. Please get a hold of it. The authenticity is unforgettable, and it will bless you, because I know that every single one of you is going through a struggle, and every single one of you is an addict in some way, shape, or form. It doesn't matter what it is, and you will be blessed by this. And feel free to follow him on Instagram, follow him on Facebook. But you have been spending time with Tullian Tchividjian, and Tullian, what a blessing, man. You ministered to my soul today. Thank you so much. And we'll do it
Thanks,
again.
man. Thanks. We will. Absolutely. Thanks, man.
If you have not already done so, please subscribe to our YouTube channel, NCMI LIVE. And if you've been blessed and strengthened in your faith through these messages, please consider supporting us at either www.patreon.com/NCMILIVE, or scan one of the following QR codes: Venmo, PayPal, or the easiest way is through Zelle, which is an instant transfer and has no fees to the donor or the recipient. Our code is 928-614-0143. We appreciate your prayers and support.